Gilmore, and I'm very happy to have with me today Chris McCain, who is a technologist director with VMware for networking and security. He's authored several books on the subject of virtualization and infrastructure design. And we're lucky to have him with us today because he is often literally traveling the globe, providing advice to customers and partners about the subject of strategy for next generation data center design. Chris, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, I want to start with the basics. What is multi-cloud and how does it provide a business competitive advantage?
Well, so interesting you said start with the basics, because in reality, multi-cloud is something that kind of confuses people, right, when they think about it. And at its core, multi-cloud is about an organization's ability to take advantage of technologies outside of an on-premise data center, let's say. And so the way I look at it, and when I talk to customers, what I try and convey to them is when you look at the different hyperscalers, the native public clouds like Google and Amazon and Oracle and Azure, all of these organizations are building proprietary type clouds. But as a customer sitting there looking at all these opportunities, I'm thinking, okay, what are the advantages in each one of these? And why would I want to use any one of these? And so multi-cloud is about trying to figure out how to leverage those different things. Now, where VMware comes into play in multi-cloud is that we have relationships with all of those hyperscalers that would allow an organization to take existing workloads running on VMware, move them into one of the architectures for one of the hyperscalers, but retain that VMware structure, so that the operational model is consistent between on-prem and then cloud. And so when organizations start to do that, now we end up in this multi-cloud environment where we have on-prem, but we have a portion that moves into Amazon and a portion that moves into Google and a portion that moves into Azure in order to bring workloads closer to those proprietary technologies that each one of those may have. Now, you mentioned what's the competitive advantage. Well, let me start by saying it is not economics. A lot of times people think that economics are going to drive this. It's not, because I'm not going to move a workload to Azure, VMware, Azure running VMware or ADS, and then it's Christmas time. It's like, oh, there's a Black Friday sale at Amazon. No, that type of thing doesn't happen. We're not looking to save pennies on the dollar by moving from one cloud to the next. It's really about those proprietary technologies. What does Google offer me in their native environment that I can take advantage of if I bring workloads closer? So the competitive advantage to the organization is exactly that. What are those technologies that I can leverage to support my business that I will be able to take advantage of better if I have proximity to those technologies?
And VMware is helping with the vetting process and helping businesses understand what the advantages or disadvantages of those different cloud services might be.
So, I don't know that VMware per se is helping customers choose one versus the other. What VMware is helping them do, and this is part of our cloud smart tech, idea or concept, but what we're helping customers do is identify that there has to be a business need. It shouldn't just be, I got to go to cloud. Oh, I come in on Monday and it's like, oh, I don't have anything in the cloud, I should just go to cloud. What we're trying to help customers do is realize that each of those different clouds has technologies that they can take advantage of. And by leveraging VMware infrastructure in those hyperscalers, we then simplify the operational model. It doesn't matter to us which one they want to go to. We want to be that partner that helps them get there in an easier fashion. And at the same time, if in 12 months, 18 months, they decide, well, we don't need that anymore, it's not worth the cost that we're paying, then you can easily bring it back on-prem because we haven't altered the underlying architecture of the virtual machines or the workloads that they migrated.
Now you've used the phrase smart cloud, and that's a phrase that VMware uses often. What do you mean by smart cloud?
Well, so I think cloud smart is the evolution of cloud first. You know, there were early on in cloud, you heard organizations say, "Oh, we have a cloud first strategy. We have a cloud first strategy." To me, that's kind of jumping the gun, thinking, "Oh, we're just going to automatically think cloud first. We're not even going to consider the demands of the workload or the needs of the workload or the security requirements of the workload. We're just going to jump straight to, oh, it should automatically be in cloud." To me, that was very irresponsible. And so now this next evolution of cloud smart is, wait a minute, cloud might be the right place, but let's first validate that it is the right place. And let's validate which cloud is the right place to put it. You know, recently I've read a lot of articles about repatriation and customers coming back on prem. And I think a lot of that is driven from what we did with cloud first. We just thought, oh, here's a workload, put it in the cloud. Here's a workload, put it in the cloud. But then we realized, wait a minute, if we just put something in a native cloud, the same way we've done on-prem, then we realize, well, we don't have high availability built into the architecture. We don't have distributed resource scheduling that can balance things as needed. And so, you know, VMware had kind of set this high bar of what infrastructure was supposed to be like. And then companies put something in the cloud and realize, wait a minute, if this virtual machine fails, it's dead. We're not used to that. We're used to, oh, it gets powered back online and all these kind of things. And so now you find organizations saying, well, maybe that wasn't the right workload to put in the cloud. And so now it's coming back online. So cloud smart is really about your doing your due diligence to ensure that what you put in the cloud actually belongs in the cloud.
So that cloud smart is assessing your business needs and making sure that the type of cloud you're using aligns with those business needs.
100%. 100%. If you're going to put something in the cloud, there absolutely must be business justification for it going to the cloud. And I'm not saying that there's not, right? I'm just saying you have to identify that. You know, for myself as an architect, as somebody who's constantly talking with customers and speaking at events, what I try to convey is that as part of your design process, because that's what there has to be. There has to be a design process to multi-cloud architecture. It shouldn't be something where it's just popping up in these different places. That's very dangerous for organizations to do. You have to be proactive in first designing your multi-cloud architecture, and that comes with business justification.
You mentioned danger, which is a nice segue to the next question I have, which is a question about cybersecurity. When we talk about a multi-cloud environment, we're talking about increasing the cybersecurity attack surface. How does VMware provide for added cybersecurity and resiliency in a multi-cloud environment?
Yeah, actually, that was a really good segue. So, with
Thank you for that.
yeah, no problem. And I'm actually glad you brought up resiliency because this is one that I've been talking to customers a lot recently about. Because if you think of the term resiliency, historically, as an architect, when I discuss resiliency, it's about designing against acts of God, hurricanes, earthquakes, snowstorms, anything that could happen that could take down infrastructure. I wanted to help organizations build architecture that could sustain and be able to, you know, live through those types of events. But you just brought two things together, which are the new norm: resiliency and cybersecurity. Because now resiliency isn't so much about the acts of God, it's about acts of malicious man. And
Sure,
so when
sure.
you look, you brought it up, you said it exactly. When you start to look at all of these different clouds, you are taking and you are expanding that attack footprint exponentially by placing workloads in all these different locations. Now, to the other part of your question, what is VMware doing? So for VMware, you know, we understand that as organizations move into cloud, and that's both VMware Cloud as well as the native public clouds, we want to make sure that we're able to maintain our position as a strong partner in those next generation data center designs. So on premise, we have the ability to provide an internal firewall through VMware NSX that literally takes the concept of a physical firewall and puts it in front of every single workload in the data center. Now, we didn't reinvent the wheel here. We didn't change the concepts or the constructs of a firewall. All we did is take that same construct and abstract it into the hypervisor so that security technologists or vSphere engineers had the ability then to apply security at every single virtual machine. So the concept is the same, but the line of thinking is very different, because historically you wouldn't think of the hypervisor as an enforcement point for security. So that happens on-prem. It also happens in the VMware cloud. So when you start to talk multi-cloud and, oh, I'm going to move these workloads to VMware Cloud on AWS, and I'm going to move these workloads to Google Cloud VMware Engine, and here's some that are going on Oracle VMware, and here's some going on Azure VMware. We maintain that same security capability because it's our hypervisor. And really, that's what we feel is part of our competitive advantage, is that we are built into the infrastructure now. We're not talking about security being bolted on as an add-on component or an afterthought or a byproduct of something. We're talking about security being built into the hypervisor. And so as organizations begin to move workloads into these different VMware clouds, I mentioned this prior, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. The operational model from a security perspective, identical, doesn't change. So if I'm a security engineer thinking, oh man, here's my company and they're thinking this got to go to cloud, if I can find a way to keep my security posture, maintain my security posture as workloads move from on-prem into these clouds, that's a win for the organization. Now, the last piece of this is, of course, those native public cloud environments where it's not a VMware hypervisor. It's the native hypervisor inside of Azure and Google and Amazon, things that we don't control. And so our position is that, long term, what we want to be able to do is extend that security operational model from the VMware hypervisor workloads into those native public cloud workloads. Thereby, if an organization is moving things into the native clouds and taking advantage of microservices and all these different things that next generation type applications sort of require, that we have a position not so much in the underlying infrastructure, but in the security pane that sits across all of those workloads. Now, just to be clear, the architecture would be different. So I mentioned a moment ago, our competitive advantage is being in the hypervisor. But if we want to be able to solve that business problem for organizations where we can maintain security, then the architecture is going to have to change because we don't own those other hypervisors. And whether that's API calls to the native constructs, whether it's an agent inside of the workloads, that's something that we figure out and we work with customers to determine the best path to take. But ultimately, we understand that multi-cloud is not going away. And for us to be successful, we really have to be that go-to security company for multi-cloud strategy.
And so it really is a cybersecurity by design. It's the first priority, really.
Absolutely. And again, part of Cloud Smart is not just, is there a business justification to go to the cloud, but how are we going to establish security on-prem and in cloud in a manner that makes it easy to manage? Because the more difficult something becomes to manage, the less likely we are to try and do something. And that's what's kind of happened with a lot of the cloud environments that have just popped up because developers are like, oh, I'll go here, I'll go there. It's like the Wild Wild West. There hasn't been security because they're not coming back to security teams. So Cloud Smart is about getting all of the organization to rethink the manner in which they approach cloud, not whether or not they use it, but the manner in which they approach it, because everybody in the organization has to be thinking about security. We're no longer in a world where there's a security team that manages a firewall and that's it. We are in a world now where there's a physical firewall and a team that manages it. And the storage team has to ask themselves, what can I do for security? And the networking team has to ask themselves, what can I do for security? And the virtualization team, what can I do for security? And the app development team, what can I do for security? And that's the only way organizations are truly going to be comfortable against the evolution of attacks. Everybody has to be involved in security. There's no one tool that's going to do everything. Every part of the IT organization has to assume a role in security.
So, Chris, you've done a great job of addressing what I think are the two primary concerns enterprises have when they think of multi-cloud, the multi-cloud environment, which is cybersecurity and business alignment. Uh, Also, though, a lot of businesses and enterprises are prioritizing environmental sustainability. And I was interested to read that VMware is also taking a leadership role in that area as well. So can you tell us and help us understand how VMware enhances sustainability, environmental sustainability in a multi-cloud environment and lowers that carbon footprint?
Yeah, I think this really goes back to VMware's roots and the origin of our technology. So I've been with VMware now as an employee for almost 10 years, but I go back to the days of ESX2 as one of the first trainers that VMware hired to ever literally, I was traveling the globe teaching ESX2. And then virtual infrastructure 3. Sorry about the little bit of a history lesson, but I
That's all
do
right.
think it's relevant. I'll get
Please,
there. I get there. I
please.
promise. With virtual infrastructure 3, it seemed to me it was the first product we had that really took the enterprise by storm. And it's because the feature set that we built in, I wasn't part of it, so I'll say that VMware built in at the time. Things like HA and DRS, they already had vMotion, but these new features were really enterprise-rich features. And so part of the big selling point from VMware from the beginning all the way through to today is that building infrastructure with physical server to workload ratio of 1-to-1 is environmentally irresponsible. It doesn't make sense to deploy physical servers that are going to run at 5 or 6% utilization. And so we go back all the way to the origin of VMware. And I think part of the driving factor was really, hey, how do we change that? How do we alter the landscape of environmental sustainability when it comes to IT by leveraging a technology that will take one physical server and run hundreds instead of just one? And we can fast forward to today and we can look at the multi-cloud, and that hasn't changed. It's beautiful because that part of VMware has remained extremely relevant when it comes to sustainability. But now you look at where we are today, and all of the technologies that we're building are all based on that same premise of distributed architecture. And that's the key. Because now if I'm looking at security, for example, right? I'm in the networking security business unit, so I'm going to focus on the security part.
Sure.
If I'm focused on security and I take the traditional model of security, I would go out and I would buy more physical firewalls and I would consume more space and I would consume more power in the data center. And then I wanted to do intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems. I would buy more physical devices. And so again, I'm consuming footprint inside of the data center, which is more power, which is more real estate long-term, eventually. But if you look at the way we are implementing our security technologies, it's the same way we've been doing since the beginning. It's a distributed architecture. So a lot of folks kind of take for granted what VMware has built historically. And they're just like, oh yeah, I got a workload and it can run anywhere and I'll get compute resources, right? I'll get memory and I'll get CPU and I'm all good. And we just like, we expect that from VMware. But now we put security into the same space. So we have firewalling capability, we have IDS IPS capability, we have network traffic analysis, we have network detection and response, all running in the hypervisor. So Glenn, think of it this way. If I have a data center and I start to add more servers to my data center, the more servers I add, I'm not just adding compute power. I'm adding more firewalling, more IDS IPS, more NTA, more NDR, without additional footprint inside of the data center, outside of the server I added, which I was adding anyway because I wanted more compute power. So when we look at it,
it's interesting, Chris, because really what you're talking about is as you enhance the cybersecurity, you're also enhancing the sustainability. You're lowering the carbon footprint. Is that correct?
Yeah, or the same could be said the other way, right? Is sure. as I add more servers, which is better for sustainability because sure. I get more virtual machines, more compute power through that. I'm also eliminating the need to buy more physical devices for security, for IDS, IPS, for any of those types of things. So I think the two are hand in hand, right? In one way, you can look at it and say we're increasing sustainability as we increase security, or I'm increasing security as I'm increasing. It's a win-win either way you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our architectural difference. That's what sets VMware apart with this distributed architecture versus something that might be agent-based or physical hardware devices. It's been our bread and butter for a long time, and I think it's really why I'm very excited about all the things we do at VMware, because there's this byproduct that's just great for the environment.
Terrific, terrific. I can't let you leave, Chris, without sharing with us, if you would, some best practices for the multi-cloud environment.
Yeah, I think we've alluded to a few of them already, but first and foremost is there has to be a business justification to go there. This cannot be something where from the top down it comes. The CIO played golf with buddies and they all gotta laugh at him because like, oh, you're not in the cloud, and then CIO comes in on Monday, go to the cloud, right? No, there has to be a business justification from top down, from bottom up. We have to know, why are we going to cloud? The second one would be, look at the economics of it. Look at the economics of where you're going and why you're going, and make sure that makes sense. And I would say probably the third one, which is one I alluded to, is design the environment. Don't just, oh, that's the cloud we're going to go, but design the environment. What is the impact of that? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to secure things? What are the technologies available? Understand all the ramifications of it, because the last thing you want is to move rapidly into a cloud environment that becomes unprotected for any period of time, exposes vulnerabilities to an organization that are then taken advantage of, and next thing you know, you're in the news, right, having been attacked. So I think it's really about your due diligence. It's about being proactive. And that's the best thing I could tell an organization, is be proactive so that you don't have to be reactive in the long run.
Chris, I very, very much appreciate your nuts and bolts approach. And thank you so much for helping us understand VMware's cloud smart approach and what it means for the multi-cloud environment. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Glenn. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You be well. Thank you.